Hello everyone, thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it's been stormy outside and hasn't been the best with all these storms passing through. But I'm here to talk to you about collaboration, and I've had quite a lot of experience in product management of things going badly and things going well. So hopefully some of these resonate with you and have had a few issues yourself in good ways and have learned from those. So I'm a product management coach. So I started my career in engineering about 15 years ago. CTO as well, and then thought product management looked easy. So I took a step into that, realized it wasn't easy at all. I went into a fintech, which was scaling through the roof, and the information just went out of date instantly. So I built my products on somebody's information that was wrong and had a few catastrophes like that. And so now moving on in my career, just trying to educate people, share the skills and the knowledge I've learned, the experiences, and really trying to work together towards an objective in a pairing fashion, because engineers pair, and product managers are the isolated guys who have imposter syndrome and least the main knowledge in every situation. So I really feel like they could do a bit of a support and a bit of an ally. So that's where I'm heading. So how many product managers do we have in the room? Just show of hands. Well, that's a good amount. And how many of the rest of you work with a product manager closely enough, I guess? Nice. All right, so we've got about half. And how many of you would say that your product could have been more successful or maybe failed due to collaboration or due to issues not working with stakeholders, customers? Or there's a few half hands, either shy and don't want to admit the failure, or a few bad memories that you're trying to block out, I'm not sure. So I've got 5 suggestions, 5 pieces of experience that I've been through, and 5 ways we've combated that and disarmed people, tried to help people collaborate, try to help people be better. So hopefully some of these resonate with you. I've definitely seen patterns in my experience, which has been from tiny startup, first employee in a startup, the chaos, the let's chase the exit, let's try and get the next investment, let's build what the sales guy says next when he comes back from this meeting, super excited. And that's what really got me wanting to move into products. But then moving into immense scale and scale-ups, immense speed of scale, immense growth, and as I mentioned, that information going out of date. And then moving into kind of corporate land, which I'm not sure how many work in that situation, but they essentially, in my experience, just want to be a startup again. Whereas I go in and try to tell them, no, you don't want to be in the chaos startup, you want to be a bit more structured. But what they want is that innovation, and they want that product mindset that everybody's striving for. So I found this nice little quote from Marty Kagan. This quote's from August last year. I wish I knew it kind of 15 years ago or 10 years ago, or as I started to move into product, because you hear things like, be the CEO of the product. And I think these are a bit of a misnomer. They try and lead you down the path of, oh, cool, we'll make the decisions. We'll get the design team and the engineering team and we'll bring them together. And I think what I've found is if you can work beyond that and enable people from around the company to come in and really take part in that product journey and that product success, it can have a huge impact that you hadn't seen with just the customer and the engineering team, for example. I think there's a common trend these days around, I think someone told me that Amazon actually did this, but the engineering team were given a set of requirements from the design team who'd been informed by the product team, who'd been to speak to the customer. And Amazon were like, hey, let's shift the engineering team up in that channel and get them designing, collaborating together. But I'd argue that doesn't go far enough, because I think if you look at an organization that's formatted in a certain way, you have different departments. You have finance, credit risk, you have medical or doctors or whoever else is popping into your mind at the moment. If an organization succeeds in that way, then surely your product success succeeds with most or a majority of those elements as well. So I'm here to try and talk about how you can collaborate with those people around the company. But still we don't collaborate, and trying to come to a few reasons around this. Maybe it's confidence, maybe it's not knowing how, maybe it's the hippo keeps on throwing solutions at you, maybe it's the late adopters in the corner who don't know what digital is or product is or anything, because that's not their job. And that's kind of okay, but you've got to really help them come in together. So I'll tell you a story which is based on my experience, not mentioning a client, but I've seen this around a few different companies. So it's kind of an interlaced journey. So it starts with us wanting to innovate. And it's everything you read in Lean Startup. Hey, we'll be the cool kids in the corner doing product management, doing innovation, really disrupting the market. And we'll show the rest of this company how to do it. And because they're quite project focused and they keep on getting things wrong, they don't speak to the customer, not patient-centric or human-centered. And it was sold in that way. So we all went in thinking, oh, fantastic, this is everything I want it to be. And plenty of cash flow to actually support us doing that. But we hit a few humps, which are probably familiar with quite a lot of you. So first they went in and people are like, hey, just do that innovation thing. You're a product guy, that's what you do, right? You innovate, you build new stuff and you disrupt markets and you take over the world and it's all cool. And we're not sure how to do that, so that's why you're here. But each company has a view of what that means. And each company is not quite sure what product management is still. So I think I've made a mistake in one particular scenario, which is actually not having a foundation. So my first suggestion is just make sure that's there. And it sounds quite obvious. If you've got squads or you've got scrum teams or anything, and you've got this OKRs model, you might think it's fantastic. But if you don't, you should be trying to question, well, how substantial is the business strategy? Which part are we pinned into here? Because when you go to the stakeholders and the other people around the company, that should resonate with those two. They should be thinking, well, we care about increasing sales, or we care about attrition, or we care about objective X, being the best in the market, whatever that might be. Because you really need them to get behind it and go out and really form that cross-functional team. So one thing from project management, which is good, in my opinion, there's a lot of good things, sorry, is the roles and responsibilities. And it's quite hard to do when you're midway through a product. You think, well, actually, we don't want to go back to square one, but it's quite important. And one particular example I could give is we agreed an objective. And we got this cross-functional team in the room, and there were doctors, there were people who interacted with patients, there were people who were part of the marketing team, people part of the risk team. They were leads of those teams. However, they were all bought into this as an objective. And we talked about this objective and then decided as a group, how do you measure success? And then with that agreement, walked around the room and said to each person, can you please tell the group what you can contribute towards this objective? And it's a really great social contract because you might think the sales guy just does more sales, but the sales guy can open up a world of people you can speak to. He's got his Rolodex full of people you can call now to have these kind of conversations. You've got doctors who know so much more than building AI or building how to diagnose somebody, for example. So it's a really great starting point. It really builds rapport. So in that situation, I thought it was fantastic. I thought we've got this team. They all seem bought into it. Everyone's happy. It's wonderful. And then this came up. And somebody just said, all right, product, is that kind of that project thing that we've been doing before? And there's a lot of product managers who might not appreciate that kind of comment. And I think it's still quite new to a lot of people. Product management is talked about as new, but actually Bill Gates' wife was a product manager when they met. Steve Jobs was a product manager. I mean, you're going back years, yet people still don't quite understand what it is. But I'd argue it's your job as a product manager to help people understand what it is. Because if they can buy into that way of working, they can really buy into the success and then contribute towards your product. So if you can just make sure they understand, one way you could do this is to follow a framework. There are lots of them. I've just picked out 3 here. The one on the far left is the one I've used the most and had the most success with. However, there are 2 others on this page. So if you can't read these, I can share the slides afterwards. But the left one is Dan Olson. Sorry, it's not. It's Alex Cohen, and it's called the venture design process. And what's good about that is it signifies a journey. I like it because you start off with persona and problem statements, which you should be doing. But then you move into this cyclical nature. You build into this learn, build, measure loop, which is where you want to be ending up. And it talks about assumptions, which is great. It talks about prototyping, which is great. So when you label this as a framework, you can really start to have those conversations around what does that mean? What is an assumption? What is a lean experiment? How are you prototyping before you do your user story? And because the whole team are backed around this, they now appreciate that journey. The one in the center is a double diamond model from the design studio. There's a few versions of it. I've got one with a few flowy arrows on, which shows that you bounce around between the stages rather than just going left to right. But what I like about it is actually the left-hand side, the problem space, has as much as the solution space. And it can really try and help you reinforce, hey, the problem's as important as the solution here. Before you get into Einstein's quote of, I'd spend 95% of my time on the problem and then 5% of my time on the solution, This just depicts it quite nicely without having to bring him into the equation. And the one on the far right-hand side is Dan Olson. So he has the Lean Product Playbook. But it's the same concept. You start with the customer, the segment, then you look at underserved needs. And that's separate to your value proposition on the top. That's separate to your feature set. That's separate to your user experience that you might want to achieve. And if you have a difference in that foundation, something new you learn, it impacts the rest of that pyramid. And you need to see how that impacts your product success as well and really have that conversation. But these are really good because they help people understand. But I'd recommend having to think about these, taking a look into one of them perhaps, but knowing what the pitfalls are. So the one on the left portrays that once you've gone through the persona stage, you don't go back to it, which is obviously not true. And the pyramid on the right-hand side, it doesn't show lean experiments. It doesn't show assumptions. So these are the things you're putting in people's minds to say, hey, this is the way we're going to work. When you bring in assumptions or lean experiments, you might be confusing them. You might be trying to talk to them about something which is not on that list, and it could just hit a bit of a speed bump. But I'd recommend the one on the left if you want to have a go through one of those. So we're talking about personas and saying, okay, we're going to go and understand this stuff now. That's our first step in Alexander Cohen's model. And you get a lot of people around the room saying, hey, we've spoken to loads of patients. We know the investors in our product. We know X, Y, and Z. We know what they are. And I think you can really trim down motivation if you try and say, well, no, you don't. But the best thing perhaps to do is just to make up some personas with those people. So let's just draft that. Let's talk about the data you have. And you always start with assumptions. And an initial persona is just an assumption anyway. So that's kind of okay. But never give up on the fact we need to go and speak to people outside. That's happened once to me before. And 2 months later, we were not in a great position where we actually started again back through that loop, and it was such a waste of time. But I really think as product people these days, we can convince people that's a good starting point. But the important thing is that the persona is always based on assumptions, and everything beyond that is always based on assumptions too. So visualize that research as it comes back in. You might have different kinds of personas you do, whether it's empathy maps. You might have jobs to be done. Really love this persona if you look at strategizers, value proposition design. If you're looking at, well, what's our strategy? You might be looking at red ocean strategy, blue ocean strategy. And if you can formalize these, there's many canvases, just use one. Just put it on the wall, just say, that's how we differentiate. Our smartphone has a better camera and a better resolution, therefore we have a better price, a higher price. And if people can understand that, they can see how you fit into the market without reading through your documents and sitting down with you for hours on end. But importantly, they have something there they can challenge, something that's quite tangible. They can ask you, well, why does that exist? Why are we building our product like this? You can say, well, our persona exists in this way. So it gives you something great that people can just share and see, and there's small artifacts around the interpretation of your research, essentially. One comment I've had from a very senior stakeholder was we didn't realize how much we'd learn from the research phase. And that person wasn't keen to go into that research phase because they thought they knew the customer. But there is a success story in coming back out and sharing this back with the team, playing it back with that cross-functional team. But the thing we tripped into next was if you give a lot of smart people loads of research about the market and loads of understanding about the person, they turn around and tell you to build a faster horse because that's what those people must need. And we could build a faster horse, that's right, but we're not solutionizing yet. We need to try and avoid going to that stage, and to me there's an intermediary stage here. But don't put that person down, just draft it up, ask them why they thought that, put it in the solutions pile for later, and we'll revisit that when we come back to the solution phase. But everything is an assumption, and people need to learn that. People need to be brought along that journey, that even if it's an MVP, or it's a feature, or it's your later solution, everything you're doing is a test. You put feature X out into the market, you don't know what's going to happen. You're just guessing what's going to happen. So it's important to try and see what we're trying to learn by putting that feature out. So I'd say start calling them assumptions. And you could do a session like this, which is assumptions mapping. We did a great example of this with about 6 people in the room. You don't want to get it too big. The session lasted 2 hours, and we had to try and trim it back into a period of time. But essentially what you're doing is you're having that cross-functional conversation. And you're speaking to people in a way around desirability, viability, feasibility, which is great. And if you do a little bit of research on this or contact me afterwards, there's a series of questions that underpins desirability. Like who is the customer, something basic, or viability, what's our acquisition channel, or feasibility, what's a regulatory risk that's going to impede our product success or our speed. And these come out to life in this. And in this particular example, what's great is you can see already, after example 2-hour session, there's a lot of risk because there's a lot of unknown important things that we don't quite know yet. But the beauty is that as people tell us, a lot of anecdotes come out. A lot of people speak about their experience. And so the information sharing in that room is absolutely brilliant. So if you haven't done one of these sessions so far, it's an awesome way to share information among people and get people bought into, well, we've contributed now. We've told you what the risks are, what the challenges might be. And I think from a product perspective, what you've just done is you've created a hypothesis-led roadmap. You've got things in the top right-hand corner, which are your key things. If you don't know it and it's really important, get out there and find it out. Don't be focused on the thing you know that's not so important, perhaps. So I'd recommend just pick the top kind of 3 in the top right. Run lean experiments against them, surveys, run qualitative research, whatever you need to do to move it over to the known, probably, but perhaps it becomes less important as you go through. And this is an overarching theme. You've got a lot of people from a lot of different sectors you're relying on. Everyone's got the different agendas. Everyone goes to conferences. Everyone has their weekly meetings with other teams. It's super hard to get people in the room. And people say they're busy, and I think you just got to respect that. You've got to appreciate that happens, but you've got to keep pushing forward as a product team, and don't let that hinder you. Whoa, what happened with that? 2 clicks. But just give periodical updates, whether it's emails, whether you publish it on a board somewhere. Do show and tell sessions where people can come along if they want to, and give that kind of feedback, but easy access to the research and where you're heading with your product. And just respectfully keep on moving. And you don't want to stop moving, but you want people to have the chance to understand and to come along that journey with you. And people will really appreciate you for it. People will really be happy that they can contribute in their free time as they can. And if things do get challenging, of course you escalate it. But if you don't need to, we can keep on moving forward with the product. So a few key takeaways, hopefully from those 5 suggestions. Just identify a team and rally around a higher purpose. A lot of companies do it. You might be already doing it, but really just focus on that because that can destroy your product as you go. Beyond that, you don't have buy-in if it's not part of corporate strategy. Help people understand what product is and be part of the journey. People don't understand it. Even if they do understand it, I think a lot of us are still learning, still trying to, there's always new ways of coming out. I look when I was a CTO of a startup thinking product was easy. The things I look back on perhaps are just new ways, of new methodologies as opposed to something that existed at the time, is what I like to tell myself. And just use the word assumption continuously. Even if it's a feature, use the word assumption. You don't know what's going to happen next. But really try and make sure you focus on what are you learning by putting it out there. And then test to see, measure to see if that came back as you thought it might. Visualize and share learnings. There's a lot of canvases. There's a lot of ways you can do this that are quite simple, quite good summaries. Just share them and have people allowed access to those things and be able to challenge them. And just respect people's time, but don't stop. Give people the chance to contribute, but don't stop moving forward. It's important to get to market. You don't want to miss the market opportunity. You want to keep on driving forward with your products. So next steps, there's a lot of content there. I think if any of the messages resonated or any of the things look interesting to a particular situation you have, just take one, just learn it, just try and understand what does that mean. And perhaps find a champion, someone who's in your product development team, like a designer perhaps, or a user researcher, and just get them bought into, hey, this might be a good idea. And then with the 2 of you, you can bring it into your wider meeting with a bit more confidence rather than being the single product manager on their own who's taking everything else on their shoulders. So that's my 5 suggestions.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you very much.